The gala hall at Novasphere's headquarters pulsed with energy. Screens along the walls displayed live feeds from around the world, partners, investors, and innovators tuning in to witness the unveiling of Amara's newest initiative. Rows of cameras lined the back, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Amara stood center stage, flanked by her team. She wore a black suit this time, sharper, bolder, as if woven from her own defiance. Her voice carried across the hall. Some said I didn't belong at their table, so I built my own. And tonight, I invite the world to sit with me, not because of legacy, but because of vision. The crowd erupted in applause. Flashbulbs flickered. Her announcement of Novasphere Global Alliance, a coalition of tech firms, startups, and governments, promised to reshape industries. It wasn't just business. It was a declaration that the future belonged to collaboration, not gatekeeping. Far away, in their estate, the Harroves watched in silence. The dynasty that once mocked her now faced irrelevance. Amara looked into the cameras, her gaze unwavering. She hadn't just survived their insult, she had turned it into her crown. The new era had begun. Dinner began with silver domes lifted in unison, revealing roasted duck and delicately plated truffles. The clink of cutlery echoed like a ritual, everyone playing their part in the theater of wealth. Amara sat between two executives who barely spoke to her, their attention drifting back to the Harroves, as if proximity to the family was more valuable than conversation with a CEO. Amara stayed composed, speaking only when necessary, her words precise and deliberate. She had weathered tougher rooms, venture capitalists who doubted her, board members who dismissed her, investors who questioned her every move. Still, this gathering carried an edge of hostility masked as elegance. The moment came when Charles Harrove Jr. rose, his champagne glass lifted high. His smile was slick, his voice loud enough to command the room. "To tonight's guest," he said, eyes fixed on Amara. "Did someone let the help in early?" The words sliced through the air. A ripple of awkward laughter followed, thin and brittle. Amara felt the heat crawl across her skin, humiliation pressing down. She gripped her glass, but did not drink. Instead, she met his gaze with a calm, unshaken stare. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks as Amara stepped onto the stage at Novasphere headquarters. Rows of journalists leaned forward, microphones thrust out, eager for her first words. Behind her, a sleek screen displayed Novasphere's logo, glowing blue against a white backdrop. Amara adjusted the microphone, her navy suit crisp under the lights. For a moment, the room fell silent, the air charged with anticipation. She let the pause stretch just long enough to command attention. "Last night," she began, her voice clear, "I was invited to a celebration that should have marked progress, partnership, and shared vision. Instead, it reminded me of something else, how fragile progress can feel in the presence of prejudice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, pens scratching across notepads. Cameras zoomed closer. Amara's eyes scanned the room. "But here's the truth. I don't need validation from those who confuse arrogance with legacy. Novasphere was built on merit, on innovation, and on the belief that the future doesn't belong to the entitled, it belongs to the determined." Applause erupted, strong and unforced. For the first time since the ballroom, Amara felt the weight lift. She was no longer defending herself, she was defining the moment. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Amara's penthouse. She stood before the glass, coffee in hand, watching the city pulse awake. Behind her, her team buzzed around a long table, publicists, legal advisors, and her chief of staff, Naomi. "They thought they could humiliate you quietly," Naomi said, sliding a folder across the table. "But we control the stage now." Inside the folder were press statements, talking points, and an outline of Novasphere's newest project, an artificial intelligence initiative that would reshape global markets. Amara skimmed it, then shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "We're not going to bury this in strategy. We'll confront it." Her team exchanged nervous glances. "Directly?" one asked. Amara's expression hardened. "If they want to play with shadows, I'll answer in daylight." By noon, every major outlet had been invited to Novasphere's headquarters. Amara would step to the podium, not just as a CEO, but as a leader unafraid of the old guard's disdain. She knew the Harroves expected her silence. Instead, she was about to set fire to their illusion of superiority, and the world would be watching when she did. In the Harrove estate study, the atmosphere was anything but celebratory. The wood-paneled room, lined with leather-bound volumes, felt smaller as Charles Harrove Sr. replayed Amara's press conference on the massive flat screen. Her words cut sharper the second time, echoing against the silence. "She humiliated us," Charles Jr. spat, pacing the carpet. His jaw was tight, his glass of scotch trembling in his hand. "We can't let her—" "Sit down," the patriarch interrupted, his voice low but firm. The elder Harrove leaned forward on his cane, eyes fixed on the screen. Unlike his son, he wasn't consumed by outrage. He was calculating. "She turned our insult into her platform," he said slowly. "Now the world sees her as untouchable." Junior scoffed. "So what? She's still just—" The cane struck the floor with a sharp crack. "She's power, Charles, and power doesn't care about your opinion." The younger man flinched, silenced. For the first time, doubt clouded his arrogance. Outside the study, the Harrove family staff exchanged wary glances. They had served the dynasty for decades, but whispers had already begun. Perhaps the age of Harrove dominance was finally slipping. Amara Bennett's black sedan glided through the iron gates of the Harrove estate, headlights cutting across the manicured lawns. She adjusted her navy suit jacket, every inch tailored to perfection. Tonight wasn't merely a dinner, it was the sealing of a $500 million partnership. As the CEO of Novosphere Technologies, Amara had fought for a seat at this table, and nothing could shake her focus. The estate loomed like a palace, chandeliers already glowing from tall windows. Valets rushed forward, their eyes lingering on her longer than usual. Amara ignored it, her heels clicking with measured grace as she stepped onto the marble staircase. Inside the ballroom, conversations hushed when she entered. Crystal glasses sparkled, gowns shimmered, and yet the energy shifted. Old money had a way of circling the wagons when outsiders arrived. She caught snippets of whispers, her name, her skin, her sudden rise in Silicon Valley. Still, Amara smiled, poised like a queen walking into court. This was more than business. It was her declaration that new power could no longer be ignored, not even by dynasties as entrenched as the Harroves. By the end of the week, Amara's speech had been replayed on every major news network. Clips circulated online, captioned with bold headlines. "CEO calls out old money prejudice," and "Novosphere defines the future." At conferences and boardrooms across the country, conversations shifted. Young entrepreneurs quoted her words. Investors who once hesitated now called Novosphere's offices with eager offers. Amara's refusal to bow had turned into a rallying cry for those tired of gatekeepers guarding outdated thrones. Inside her headquarters, the energy was electric. Her employees moved with renewed pride, their CEO's face plastered across magazines and financial journals. Naomi entered Amara's office with a stack of proposals. Partnership requests from Asia, Europe, and 3 Fortune 100 companies. They want in, on our terms. Amara leaned back, a faint smile tugging at her lips. This was more than victory, it was transformation. What the Harroves had tried to use against her had amplified her reach instead. Still, Amara knew this was just the beginning. The higher she rose, the harder others would try to drag her down. But she was no longer playing defense, she was building an empire. The ballroom's laughter fractured into uneasy murmurs. Some guests sipped their wine as though nothing had happened. Others stared down at their plates, unwilling to intervene. The chandeliers above sparkled coldly, casting harsh light on every face that chose silence. Amara's chest tightened, but she kept her smile intact, her expression a mask of steel. She had long ago learned that dignity wasn't granted in rooms like this. It had to be defended. What stung wasn't Charles Jr.'s cruelty, but the complicity of the others. She glanced at Charles Harrove Sr. The patriarch sat unmoved, his weathered hand resting on his cane. His silence was endorsement enough. Amara understood then. This wasn't just a careless insult. It was a test. A reminder that her billions in revenue, her innovation, her influence, all meant little in the shadow of centuries-old privilege. Amara placed her napkin neatly beside her plate and rose. The movement drew stares, but she didn't falter. "Excuse me," she said softly, her tone gracious yet final. Without waiting for acknowledgement, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking like gavel strikes. The room remained hushed, heavy with cowardice. The night air wrapped around Amara as she stepped through the estate's grand doors, cooler and freer than the suffocating ballroom she had just left. The valet rushed forward, surprised by her early departure, but she lifted a hand. "I'll walk," she said, her voice steady. She needed distance before climbing back into the world of polished facades. Her heels clicked along the stone pathway, the sound sharp in the quiet of the manicured gardens. For a moment, she let herself feel the sting, the humiliation of standing alone in a room where power had turned to mockery, but only for a moment. She straightened her shoulders. This was not the first time someone had tried to diminish her worth, and it would not be the last. If the Harrows thought her silence was surrender, they had mistaken her entirely. Pulling out her phone, Amara typed a quick message to her assistant. "Schedule a press briefing tomorrow. I want every outlet there." Her lips curved into a subtle smile. Tonight, she had been dismissed. Tomorrow she would make it clear. She didn't need their table. She was building one of her own.